Sorry, I just realized I forgot to actually introduce myself, but I am going to ad hoc introduce myself. Hopefully, I am known in these parts and don't need too much introduction. Um, but look, hotwire is a pretty common topic, at least in like these circles, particularly amongst Rails people. Um, but while we discuss turbo drive, turbo frames, and turbo streams a lot, um, and stimulus, it's less common for us to discuss turbo native and strata. So this talk was originally written for the Laravel community. I'm not going to spend as long defining hotwire in this group because I'm assuming there's some sort of understanding here, although people have been helping me realize that actually there's probably less understanding of hotwire than I thought. So feel free to ask me questions about it. But let's just take a moment to quickly revisit Turbo Native and Strata. We normally talk about Hotwire as a suite of web frameworks. Turbo Native, however, is the gateway to mobile application development. And so Native wraps your Turbo app in a web view to allow it to be seamlessly deployed on Android and iOS. While using Turbo Native in isolation will never produce an app that looks or feels, truly native, it gives small web teams the capacity to race out a native application without Swift or Kotlin skills. Combined with view caching and prefetching, native apps feel close to native, but they can be built in a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the cost. And Strata then is the secret sauce that allows turbo native applications to feel truly native. I've built a few hybrid apps in my days, and I find that web components usually look great in a mobile context, but there are certainly elements that just feel wrong. And Strata allows you to mix in a little bit of native into your, use a mix of native and web elements in your application. And the same way that you want to start with Turbo Drive before dropping down to Turbo Frames and then dropping down to Turbo Streams, you want to start with Turbo Native before dropping down to Strata. Strata simultaneously provides the tooling required to make a web app viable in the native mobile space, but it also adds a layer of complication that high performance teams would probably want to avoid. And so I'm not a Swift developer, but I found the Strata demo app to be a great template, and the documentation is actually pretty good. Saying this, I would appreciate having someone with Swift and Kotlin skills on a team, because while I could work it out, I find Xcode in particular to be horrible to learn. And so recently I was speaking to a CTO who was saying they need to replace a mobile app that they license from a third party. They knew they wanted to use a cross-platform mobile development framework, and had considered Ionic and React Native, but all of their devs are trained in the PHP framework, Laravel. And while Laravel has a lot of conceptual similarity to Rails, Laravel has a lot of conceptual similarity to Rails, and a tool called Livewire, which is basically the same as Turbo. Unfortunately, however, Livewire doesn't have a mobile aspect, and the Laravel people I spoke to were unaware of something comparable to Turbo Native. So while Hotwire is built by 37 Signals, it isn't technically a component of Rails. Hotwire is platform agnostic, and as long as your server conforms to the specification, any language or framework can use it. In fact, most of the pain I had learning Hotwire was the lack of Rails-specific documentation. Thankfully, there are many great creators that have stepped up to release tutorials, but I wondered, could you use Turbo Native and Strata inside a Laravel app to minimize the mobile learning curve? And given that I'm standing here, you can probably guess that yes, you can use Hotwire in Laravel. It'd be a pretty bad talk otherwise. And it's actually a pleasurable experience. So Turbo Laravel is a great little plugin that acts as the glue between Laravel and Hotwire. And while Hotwire is mostly a set of HTML conventions, it also utilizes headers to distinguish the different types of response. And so Turbo Laravel seamlessly integrates with Laravel to provide the hints that Turbo needs to render the page correctly. In fact, I not only built a Turbo web app in my But in my first time ever using Laravel, I had both the web and mobile apps working in under an hour. And keep in mind that that hour included learning Laravel from scratch. So let's see it in action. If I can find my cursor again. There we are. Now, I am going to slightly rotate myself because I want to be able to see that screen as well. Big. So the first thing I'm going to need is a Laravel app. So I am going to start by just creating one of those. And it was certainly a an interesting choice to do this on the library Wi-Fi, but it seems to be working for me. Next up, we just want to install Turbo into Laravel.
So familiar, so different.
Yeah, yeah. My whole experience with Laravel is like, this feels kind of Railsy, but not. Like, then there's just a simple Turbo install script. Obviously, that's the directions for that are on the Turbo, sorry, the Turbo Laravel site.
Yeah.
Yes. Right, and that's it. I now have an application. So basically, I'm just going to run the web server in that window. But that was, yes,
question. Yeah, I forgot to tell you, qualify for Ruby course, we have to win Ruby.
Fair.
I'm actually all for coordination.
I have thoroughly enjoyed sharing ideas with the PHP community. It's been a wonderful experience. Now that is a bit big. There we go. So first thing I'm going to want to do is, well, just create some routes. That is quite simple. There's, as you can see there, the Laravel route system, it's pretty easy to get used to. There's not much to it. So here's one I prepared earlier. Not much to it. I'm basically just creating some basic pages, welcome activity, whatever. This one, obviously, there are sub pages here where name is just a replacement. Obviously, it's pretty similar to what we expect in Rails. There's not a lot there. Next, because I don't want to have to retype the layout every time, I'll just create a really simple layout for my page. I'm going to get rid of this bottom bar so you get a little bit more space to see. And you can see here again, it's all pretty straightforward. So this slot is basically just where the content's going to drop in. And this is an important line here. What I've done is I've adding the JavaScript file. When I ran that install script, it also installed the JavaScript needed for Turbo and Turbo Native. Without that, your native app's just not going to work. So next up, I'll just quickly produce the navigation that goes along with this. You'll see that I did not bother to even create a CSS file. Lots of inline stuff here, but it's simple, it works, right? That gets me all of the navigation I need, and probably gonna help if I save those pages. Then because of that layout, the actual page templates are really quite simple. So I'm only going to put a header on this particular page. This is the default welcome page that Laravel provides. But now that I've got a layout, I can just plot that. It's pretty straightforward.
This X layout thing, interpreted by Laravel or interpreted by server?
No, that's a Laravel or a Blade, yeah, Laravel Blade thing. Basically, it reads that and goes, okay, I need to go drop this inside the layout.
So it's not just text template.
So while the syntax is different, there's certainly a conceptual similarity to how we build things inside Rails. And I mean, the other thing is I've just found it so simple. It was so easy for me to get used to. there was sort of nothing that really complicated it. And you'll probably notice I also haven't gone around building out controllers for every one of these pages. Just magic happens and it works. This is the only one that's a bit interesting. So a lot of people here would be used to this concept of a turbo frame, but for those who aren't, the turbo frame allows you to make changes to a particular part of a page without having to re-render the whole page. And by default, when you make changes inside of a frame, the URL won't change. It will just update in place without changing the URL. So that is where I will render the different user details. So now that we have that, I'll just quickly pop in some pages with the turbo frames. So you'll see here, this is the page for the Adam Rice user, and you'll see that there is no other part to it. It's just the turbo frame. That's all I need to send back. I don't need to send the rest of the page. As a side note, however, if you did respond with the full page, Turbo would be smart enough to find this ID and just rip it out of the response. It's just so you can save yourself a little bit of bandwidth or a bit of like CPU time by not rendering the whole page out. Oops. That's my cursor again. And that's it. I now have a functioning application. So I just need to get a browser window to prove it. But there you go, working application. And you'll see that Turbo is also giving us some fun stuff like preloading of these links when I hover over them so that they're already ready to go as soon as I click it. And importantly here, you'll see that when I click on that Atom link, the response is only the turbo frame, and yet it knows how to update the page. So I thought that was actually a pretty good start that I could have application running that quickly, given that I know absolutely no Laravel and haven't used PHP in decades. But this is a mobile application talk. So now is where we get back into the mobile state. So my favorite application, Xcode. It's going to boot somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, I'm giving you the true Xcode experience. Still bouncing in my dock. Yeah. We will get there eventually.
I've done PHP in a long time. Do you not need open PHP tabs? Like you just had curly braces in those files.
I think the layout has the
Yeah,
oh no. Oh, hang on, no, not for the template file.
They invented a whole other language.
Yeah. But I mean, the same way that you don't put you don't need to use Ruby tags inside of an ERB file. These are all yeah.
Some of the pages did actually have open PHP tags.
Yeah, I certainly had some of them had it open, but not closed as well.
That's standard. Yeah. I can't remember which file that was. Sorry, but yes, the routes file would be a real PHP file. Yes, and I was gonna explain that, but I'm now got to remember the exact terminology. Who remembers the terminology for what this is? Yeah, I mean, it's got your bag, but it's basically like Nipple. Yeah, it's basically like that. Anyway, we're going to keep moving along. Now Xcode has decided it will boot, so I can actually bring that into play now. Let's say new project, and then I can pull this over to the other screen. So we're just building an app, an iOS app, obviously. Call it and pop that in there. Great, got ourselves an iOS app. So next up, we just need to add the Turbo dependency to this app. Oops. Add package dependency. Obviously I have previously brought this in. Normally you would just paste the URL of the package in here, or you could search for it there. But I have already completed that task. And then I'm going to use the Turbo Navigator. There we go, add that package. So now we have Turbo is now integrated with the iOS package. Then I need to go to scene delegate. It is not worth spending too much time explaining exactly what's going on here, other than to say that this code I'm dropping in comes from the demonstration apps. I've just put in the URL of my web server. Clearly production code would look a little different, but conceptually it's going to be the same. We're basically grabbing a turbo, what they call a turbo navigator, but then essentially set it as the controller, sorry, for the application. Then
The web server would be required. Local server package with the app.
yes, so your web server is remote. Yeah, the real benefit of this approach is that you take your existing deployed production app and you just chuck a mobile app in front of it, and you haven't needed to build out a whole new system. So yeah, normally that URL would be wherever your production system is going to be. Now, the last trick is just because I'm sending this over HTTP, by default, iOS will not allow those requests to happen. So I just need to authorize that.
Absolutely built
Yeah,
sharp light.
it sounds like it. Yeah. I can't see the right side of this.
Did that start? There was some pictures. What was the server? Someone has written one. An Objective-C web server that we saw.
Yes.
You can use Puma there.
Yes, I don't like Puma Dev, and I can't remember why.
It'll spin up your app. Also, like generate numbers. Just put it a little bit forward so it doesn't follow him. Okay.
Forward.
Put a symlink to the directory.
Does it eventually come back up, or just have to pull it out?
What I generally do is not keep it like that, so it doesn't get switched on.
Sorry, remote people, for the technical challenges. Just waiting for the projector to come back. Here we go. There we go. So in theory, we should now have a simulator. Yes, so there's our Turbo native app. I might make that fit better on the screen if I can work out how to do that. Maybe I can't. Where's physical size? Sorry, I'm facing the wrong way. Window. Oh yeah, physical size. Oh, that's tiny. But I can. No.
Where's my real phone? Fix screen.
It's screen. There we go. So you'll see I can change out these pages. You get the little transitions like you'd expect in an iOS app. All this stuff's customizable, but these are the defaults. And you can see that the those frames are working. So I mean, already we've got a working application in iOS, and we are only, I don't know, 10 minutes in, I'm not sure. So the last piece of that puzzle then is going to be adding in Strata, because while this menu works, it doesn't look particularly native. And sure, a designer could put some touches to it, but it's never going to feel truly integrated into this app. So if you wanted to make this feel a little bit more like it's a real native app, you would drop in a native menu. So Strata itself is going to create a bridge that exists between JavaScript and the native platform. And the Strata controllers are essentially an extension of Stimulus. So the first thing we need to do is add Stimulus to Laravel to get this working. Same process as before, download the package. Run install script. The only difference now is that because I'm now using JavaScript, I just need to have Feed watch and build the JavaScript for me. But otherwise, it's exactly the same as where we were before. And so now I can just use the generator to create menu component or menu controller, I should say, sorry. So then if we go back to VS Code, which I really struggle to see from this angle. There's VS Code. I will have a menu controller now. And you can see, for those who are familiar with Stimulus, you can see that it's all pretty stock standard in here. The only thing to notice is I've just as a convention of my own making, I put anything that under this bridge directory if it's going to be a native component. That is not a requirement that's enforced upon you. It's just something I did for simplicity. And you will notice as well when I drop in this code that there is now a this bridge component. So we're importing from Strata rather than from Stimulus. But otherwise, for those familiar with Stimulus, this is going to look exactly like Stimulus. The only sort of difference is you can see that it's it basically sends a notification to the bridge. So when this runs, it's just sending a message across the bridge to say, do the display thing. And there'll be native code that knows how to handle this. You can see that I'm passing along the items from the menu across the native bridge. But as it stands right now, the problem we're going to have is that we're going to end up with two menus. There's the one that I want for the web and the one that I want in the mobile app. So we want to disable one the context. So in this case, I'm going to use the unless turbo native. Not sure what you call these things. Operator? Don't know. Method? Wrapper? Macro? Well, that sounds like a great word. So now this menu will only show in a web context. If I refresh the page, it's gone now from the mobile context. And then in the same way that I could tell it to show that only if it's not, unless it's turbo native, I can also say, please run this code only if we're in turbo native. Now, I should have continued working on this after my last time giving this talk because I ran into a problem that I didn't understand in Swift and I hacked my way out of it, and I'm going to continue hacking my way out of it. So just please ignore the fact that I'm hacking. Now, you do on the Swift side, on the iOS side, you are going to need classes that are listening out for these messages and act upon them. You're obviously going to need your native components in there. That stuff is, it's not so much it's hard to do, but it takes a little bit of time to integrate. So rather than make you watch that, I will just bring in an application that I prepared earlier. This application is it's literally just the Strata demo app with some very minor changes. But ultimately, I found that the demo app they supply is so good, and it comes with some default components. So it didn't seem to be much point in rebuilding it all. Now the first build of an iOS app is pretty slow, but you can see we've got our application again, but now we have a native component for the menu. So I mean, it's an extraordinarily small amount of code for what we've achieved, really. Oh no, that's not how that works. So it really blew me away how quickly I was able to go from never having seen Laravel to having both the web and native apps with native components. And there are a few takeaways for me. Firstly, I strongly believe that we've been overcomplicating the web. And as someone who's been an individual contributor, a business leader, and a de facto product owner, I've seen how companies have accepted this complication and the impact it has on development times and costs and costs and timelines. And I see this as a really pragmatic way to expand your ecosystem into mobile applications while keeping the majority of your app in the platform and language in the language and framework that you love. So of course, if you happen to love Rails, well, you can keep it in Rails. Best of all, it's a quick and low cost way to get to market. your customers are going to prefer the app you can give them now over the one you may be able to release in future years. And it should be expected that I appreciate Hotwire, or I never suggested it, but credit where it's due, Laravel is actually extremely easy to get started with. While my heart will always remain with Ruby and Rails, I've come to appreciate seeing and hearing the different ways of working from the Laravel community. And Laravel has enough conceptual similarities to Rails that we have a lot to learn from each other. And I'm excited to keep sharing the ideas with that community. So when you've been programming for nearly a quarter century, it can be easy to get stuck in your bubble. But there are so many exciting projects both within and outside of the Ruby community. And so while I am clearly not an expert in Swift development or Turbo Native, I'd be more than happy to take questions. Yes.
Have you had any challenges with getting like macro apps like that approved by Apple?
Have I had any challenges getting apps like this approved by Apple? No. While I haven't deployed a Turbo Native app, I've deployed plenty of hybrid apps and they've been fine. Yeah, they just push it through. Occasionally you do get someone at Apple in particular, in fact, only Apple, that wants to be problematic, but I haven't found it's directly related to anything hybrid. It's just sometimes someone reads the specification sheet the wrong way and wants to give you a hard time.
Any options for accessible
Yes.
Deploying this on like getting a group like a Ruby they usually say like you can't have the payment gateways in the web app because they want the payments to be through iOS so they can get 30% commission of that, which is huge.
Yes.
So just making you aware that you have some big stuff you should be ready.
Yeah, that is a good call out that having a payment gateway inside your app can be a problem in general. Apple will sometimes cut you on that. And it's luck of the draw. I've got an app with a payment system that has been approved for the last 8 years, but I hear horror stories all the time of people who can't get them approved. So don't assume that you can get a payment gateway through. It has to be hidden well enough that they don't notice it. Too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Anton.
Laravel, like, are there any frameworks that kind of prefer that will be as easy compatible, like Django? Would it work with Django with you?
So the question is, given that it's worked really well with Laravel, would it work with other frameworks? While I don't know the specific list of frameworks, there's quite a few of these plugins for different ones. I'd be surprised if there isn't a Django plugin for this because there are so many of them out there now. There's actually not that much to the server side of it. I think that it's pretty easy to integrate, I think. But sorry, I don't know the exact list of options. Yes.
I imagine if you had like very little Swift knowledge that getting those native, like the Swift side of things built out would be a bit of a challenge. It seems like the menu component comes with the demo application. Does the demo application have lots of components? Are there other like external libraries of native components that you can just use? Or if you're building out a moderately complex application, would you find yourself having to learn how to build those components to Swift?
Yeah, so are there a lot of existing components or do you essentially have to build them yourself? My understanding is, so the demo app only comes with 3 components. There's 2 menus and I think a form generator or something. I believe there is a lot of work going into component libraries, particularly out of, are you familiar with hotwire.dev, I think is the website, maybe. It seems to have a collection of all stuff related generally in Hotwire. Then there's the guy who does all the Turbo Native stuff, Joe something. He has a lot of, sorry? Yeah, something like that. He has a lot of great stuff, but my feeling based on only what I've done, so what you've seen is all of the work that I've done with it. So I'm certainly no expert, but my feeling is that if you're going to lean into these native components more heavily than what I've just done, you probably want to have a native person around. I've found that, like, yeah, I can work it out, but I'm pretty inefficient at it. And have, on top of that, my experience with just with native application, sorry, mobile applications in general, is that it's pretty common that for both Apple and Google to just like change the rules, and then suddenly you've got to make the broad changes to your app. And it's so much easier if you have someone who just knows how to do native development. I've been maintaining that app I was just referring to that's 8 years old, and I can get it done, but I'm really slow at it. And I think you'd be better off having, I think the good thing is you don't need to have too many people. You don't need to have a whole team of native. As long as you got someone though. Yeah. Questions? All right. Perfect. What's that, sorry? I can assure you I've never tried it in Objective-C. All right, thank you.